Hello, and welcome to KRAD Readings, the February edition. Uh, last month, when I revived the channel, I read a story called Ticonderoga Beck and the Stalwart Squad, which I had to read from my manuscript because the book wasn't published yet. Well, it's been published. See, there you go. Cool book. Um, the It debuted at the Farpoint Convention earlier in February. Thrilling Adventure Yarns 2022, which you can now get from the Fine Feathered Finks at Crazy 8 Press. Uh, it was not the only anthology that debuted that weekend, however. Also coming out then was Phenomenon's Season of Darkness. This is the second of two shared world superhero anthologies created by Michael Jan Friedman that I've been contributing to. In honor of the release of the second Phenomenon's anthology, I am going to read my story from the first Phenomenon's anthology, which is called Every Human Creature. The conceit of Phenomenon's is that it's an alternate history. The divergent point is basically 2009. And the notion is that the crash of 2008, the country did not recover as smoothly from that as it did in our world. And that's one difference. The other difference is they're superheroes. So there's a whole bunch of really cool contributors to it. We all got to create our own superheroes, but this is also, as I said, a shared world, which means that characters all exist together, and there are sometimes crossovers and interactions and team-ups and stuff. In fact, my story for Seasons of Darkness is a huge team-up story with several different characters, which I will read in a later edition of KRAD Readings. Today I'm going to read my story from the first of these, which is called The Light Shines in the Darkness, and it's about a character named Luminosity. I created Luminosity like 30 years ago, and she's a hero who can control light. She can manipulate light waves in various ways, and I've been wanting to do something with her forever, and just the right project didn't come up until a year ago when Michael Jan Friedman invited me to participate in Phenomenons. So, without further ado, here is The Light Shines in the Darkness by Keith R.A. DeCandido. Juan Sanchez watched in horror as two of the Bronx bruisers trashed his bodega. They both wore all-black uniforms with stylized BB logos on the chest. One was a short, stocky, olive-skinned woman who broke things just by tapping them. The other was a dark-skinned man with hands that glowed, and everything he touched caught fire. The woman had smashed several of his shelves and the glass on the refrigerated units that held the milk and soda and beer, and the man had set a bunch of the merchandise on fire. "What do you want?" Juan asked in Spanish. "You want money? Take it, please. Just don't trash my place." "Sorry," the woman said in the same language. "That ain't the job. The job is to trash your place." Juan gulped. He'd moved to New York City from the Dominican Republic after his older brother died of cancer. Alberto had trusted him with the store on St. Anne's Avenue in the Bronx that he'd been running for decades. Juan hadn't wanted to come to New York at first, but he'd grown to love it. The bodega already had a solid customer base, and Juan had grown deeply fond of them all, from the older adults who bought coffee on their way to work in the morning, to the little kids who came by for candy and soda after school, to the younger adults and older kids who came by for food on their way to wherever they went at night. Now, though, it was about to all be destroyed. The man had melted both Juan's own cell phone and the landline behind the counter, and the woman had smashed Alberto's old Beretta M9 that he'd had from his days in the Marines before he opened the store. Juan had never fired the weapon, never even brandished it until today, but he'd always felt better having it there. Now it was gone. "We're fuerte and fuego," the woman said in English this time, "and it ain't safe for you to stay in business, ese." A voice seemingly from nowhere said, "Seriously? Strength and fire? Those are your code names?" And then she just appeared in the middle of the store. Luminosity. Juan couldn't help but smile. The pale woman with the purple hair stood before them, wearing her trademark white bodysuit with a prism design on the chest, as well as a burst of color. Luminosity had been protecting the Bronx for several years now. She was even part of United Front, but Juan had heard that she'd left the group after Grey Guardsman's death. Fuego snarled. You don't scare me, puta. You kiss your girlfriend with that mouth? Then Luminosity looked at Fuerte. Yeah, I guess you probably do. Then Fuerte reached out to grab Luminosity. But her hands went right through her. What the? Fuerte stumbled, now off balance. Luminosity suddenly seemed to vanish from where she'd been in front of Fuerte and appear right next to her, at which point Luminosity quicked Fuerte in the leg. Juan winced as he heard the sound of bone snapping. Fuerte cried out in pain as she collapsed to the floor. Well, I guess that's why you're Fuerte and not invulnerabilidad, Luminosity told her. Oh, you're gonna pay for that, bitch, Fuego said. How? Luminosity asked, and then suddenly Fuego's hands weren't glowing anymore. What the? Fuego stared at his hands, looking confused as to how Luminosity had stopped his powers. She took advantage of that confusion to deliver an uppercut to Fuego's stomach. Suddenly unable to breathe, he too collapsed onto the floor. Finally feeling it was safe to come out from behind the counter, Juan grabbed the fire extinguisher and used it to put out the small fires that Fuego had started. He also heard sirens growing closer. At Juan's questioning glance, Luminosity said, I called 911 and told them it was a phenomenon's case, so they should have the fancy manacles to keep Fuego and Fuerte here in check. Fuerte's voice was a ragged whisper. The Bronx Bruisers don't take this from nobody, puta. The name's Luminosity, not bitch or puta. And I better not see any of you guys around again. Juan looked around the wreck of his store. Insurance would probably cover replacing the broken shelves and maybe the phones, but it might not. And it'd have to replace the merchandise, and meanwhile, the milk would go bad and the soda and beer would go flat. He wondered if he'd even be able to stay in business. I don't understand. Why won't we take the case? Lucia Maldonado asked her boss, Bronx District Attorney Scott Hallow, the question as they stood on the steps of the Bronx County Courthouse on 161st Street in Grand Concourse. The blocky structure blocked out the sun on this hot summer day. Just because some guy in a costume brings Tom Brinsfield in doesn't mean he's guilty, Chia. The Grey Guardsman isn't just some guy in a costume. He isn't an officer of the law or an officer of the court. It's a citizen's arrest. You want to know how many citizens' arrests have led to a conviction since I got elected DA? I'll give you a hint. The answer is a number smaller than 1. But, however, Scott was on a roll. Plus, Brinsfield is seriously connected. He plays golf with the mayor and goes to the theater with the governor when he's in town. If we want to put together a case against him, we need it to be airtight. And the fact that one of these phenomenon freak shows is part of it means that the case has holes in it the size of my Buick. I'm sorry, Chia, but we need to prosecute cases we can win. Lucia watched as Scott continued on his way to his lunch break. She wasn't sure what amazed her more, that Scott wouldn't even consider prosecuting Brinsfield, that the Bronx DA actually drove a Buick. That was a flashback scene, by the way. I should have made that clear. There are flashbacks throughout this story. They're in italics in the text. Anyway, back to the present. Lucia Maldonado entered the large building on Commerce Avenue that used to be an auto body shop and now served as the headquarters of the phenomenon known as Luminosity. After finishing at the Sanchez Mini Mart, she'd altered the light waves that reflected off her skin and hair so that she was olive-skinned instead of pale, and her hair was dark brown, with a few too many streaks of gray for a woman in her mid-30s as far as Lucia was concerned. She also altered the colors on her costume so it now looked like a plain black bodysuit. Excuse me. Then she caught a 6 train at Brook Avenue and took it to Westchester Square and did the 10-minute walk from there to HQ. Honey, I'm home, she said after deactivating the alarm and entering. While she tried to keep the location of her HQ a secret, some other phenomenons knew it, as did 1 or 2 others. The alarm was a necessary precaution. From the workstation at the back of the large space, Deandra Jones said, "You can make that joke as many times as you want, Luch. I ain't gonna laugh." She got up from the workstation. "How'd it go?" Two Bronx bruisers went after the Sanchez Mini Mart on St. Anne's. I took care of them, and some cops from the 4-0 took them away in the fancy manacles. Hope the damn things actually worked this time. Which bruisers? Fuerte and Fuego. For real? Deandra shook her head. They got the dumbest damn names. I mean, they got one chick that calls herself Mastiff. The hell's that? Deandra sat back down at her workstation while Lucia went over to the fridge to grab a bottle of water. Fighting bad guys always made her thirsty. "You know what's messed up?" she asked as she unscrewed the water bottle. "This wasn't a shakedown for protection money or any of the usual crap that the bruisers get into. They just wanted to trash the place. Yeah, maybe they don't like the roast beef." Lucia sipped some of the water, then asked, "What's wrong with one's roast beef?" "I don't know. Every time I get a sandwich there, the meat's all nasty. How'd you take Freedom and Fuedwick down?" Snorting, Lucia said, "Fuerte and Fuego." Deandra waved her arm back and forth. "Whatever! You know I don't speak Spanish. I got enough trouble with English." "Mm-hmm. Anyhow, it was pretty easy. Fuerte fell for the 'I'm not really there' trick. I walked into the place invisible, then made the light reflecting off me show up 3 feet in front of me. She tried to grab me, but I wasn't really there, just my image. And then I gave her a konsetsugiri to her leg." "Oh, wait, you don't speak Japanese either. That's a joint kick." Fixing Lucia with an annoyed look, Deandra said, "Then just say joint kick, Luch. Damn." After drinking some more water, Lucia continued. "Fuego was even easier. I made him think that his powers didn't work. His hands glow when he does his thing, so I made the glow go away. He thought his powers went bye-bye, but I just stopped his hands glowing. He could have burned me if he touched me, but he was so freaked out I just waltzed in and punched him in the solar plexus." "Nice. Oh, by the way, I think I got all the bugs out of the new toy. This is that weird-ass search engine you came up with. It ain't weird-ass, it's a damn work of genius. You know, like everything I touch." Deandra grinned. "Yeah, well, last time I checked you were a biophysicist. That don't exactly scream person who can create search engine, you know? Remember after I got my doctorate, wouldn't nobody hire my ass because they didn't believe a black woman?" Lucia rolled her eyes. "A black woman from Mott Haven was really a biophysicist. Yeah, I know. I was there, remember? One of the crap jobs I took before Teletron Takahiro hired me was downtown programming computers. Completely self-taught, mind you, and I learned a ton more on the job." "And you learned enough to create a search engine that is somehow more useful than Google?" "Yep. Uses an AI algorithm to search through every relevant database it can find, even some classified and private ones that Google can't get at. And then it uses heuristics to give us a conclusion." "You realize I only understood about 4 of those words, right?" Deandra chuckled. "Yeah, I know. That's why I'm the brains and you're the brawn." "Well, that and you suck in a fight." Lucia finished the last of her water. "Speaking of that, I gotta get to the dojo. Want to meet up for dinner with me and Gabriella after?" "Where are we eating?" "I was thinking the Cuban place." Deandra winced. "Nah. Last time I ate there, I saw 3 roaches, and they was more appetizing than what I ordered." "I'm telling you, that was all in your head." "Whatever. Say hi to your sister for me. I'll see you tomorrow." Another flashback. "You really quit the DA's office?" Lucia sat with Deandra in a bar on 3rd Avenue. "I can't do this anymore, D. Every time I prosecute a case, they say it's the people versus whoever, but that's bullshit. The only ones out there fighting for actual people are the phenomenons. And half the time they stop some bad guy, and then people like Scott don't even prosecute. Or don't even get that far because the cops screw up the arrest. I'm tired of it." "So what you gonna do?" Shrugging, Lucia sipped her mojito. "I can work at the dojo with Gabriella for a while. She's been bugging me to take over some of the teaching anyhow." "I got another idea." Deandra gulped down a large amount of her beer. "Remember back at Bronx Science we did that project where we tried to come up with a scientific way for people to get superpowers? How could I forget, especially once the phenomenon started showing up. But I think I figured out a way to make it work for real." Lucia stared at her childhood friend. For real, for real?" "Yep. Figure with all these kung fu moves and some actual superpowers, you can make a damn fine phenomenon. Then you really could help the people. You in?" The Bronx Bruisers hit 3 more places on St. Anne's Avenue over the next 2 days. Mastiff trashed the Boricua nail salon, smashing all the chairs and the cash register, but not stealing any of the money. The Rain Man flooded a tiny newsstand near one of the BX-17 bus stops, ruining all the newspapers and magazines and shorting out the refrigerated unit that contained sodas, juices, and iced teas. Luminosity didn't make it to either location until it was too late. However, Luminosity did get to the Shenghua Chinese restaurant just as the marsupial was starting to bounce around and smash tables with his oversized feet. Luminosity removed all light from the room for a few seconds, then restored it, but shifted around the light that reflected off the table so they appeared to be somewhere other than where they were. Sure enough, the marsupial jumped toward one and went right through it, which threw him off balance. Luminosity then noticed that his oversized feet weren't natural. One of them started to come off when he stumbled to the floor. It took a great deal of concentration, but it was worth it in this case. She focused and was able to compress enough ambient light to form a laser that burned through the marsupial's footwear. The front half of each of the oversized feet in the marsupial's outfit caught fire and fell away, revealing smoking circuitry underneath. "Crap!" the marsupial said, and immediately ran out of the restaurant. Unfortunately, some customers were trapped under one of the smashed tables, and Luminosity had to help get them out, so she had to let the marsupial get away. The owners, a married couple named Fen and Anna, thanked Luminosity. "It's my pleasure," she said. "You guys are the best spare ribs in the Bronx." Anna said, "I do not know if we can continue to stay open after this." "Of course we can," Fen said quickly. "Don't talk crazy." "I'm not crazy, Fen, but look at this. Who's going to come in here now with all these broken tables?" "The bruisers won't be back," Luminosity said. "I'm going to make sure of that." "I hope so," Anna muttered. Lucia hopped the 6 back to HQ, intending to ask Dee to use her shiny new search engine, to try to figure out where the bruisers were headquartered. This had gone from an annoyance to an out-and-out threat to the neighborhood. Not just Anna and Fen, but Juan, Estelle at the nail salon, Quento at the newsstand, and Manisha Nabaya at the cafe on the corner of 139th, which hadn't even been hit, were all making noises about shutting down or moving elsewhere. Dee had bought the old auto body shop outright with money she'd saved at her various shitty jobs, as well as the well-paying one for Teletron Takahiro Industries. But it had taken all of her money to buy it and refurbish it and put in all the fancy equipment, as well as an apartment for her to live in. Lucia had been using her share of the dojo that she and Gabriella ran, which included rent from the business that used the other storefront in the same building, as well as the yoga and Pilates teachers that used the dojos for their classes to help support Dee. She filled Dee in on what happened at Shenghua. "Damn," Dee said. "They got the best spare ribs in the Bronx. Tell me about it." "All right, let's see what we got." Another flashback. The treatments from Deandra took a month, and then it took the better part of a year for Lucia to get used to her powers and be able to wield them properly. Her signature style soon became apparent. She would alter the way light reflected off objects, thus changing people's perceptions. After all, sight was simply the eyes collecting the light that reflected from objects. Dee had given Lucia control over light waves. She could make a place brighter or darker, change its color, and best of all, alter where someone's reflected light was seen. It was when a 2 train derailed on Southern Boulevard at 172nd Street late one weeknight that she had her big moment. Most of the rescue operations were performed by United Front, but Luminosity played a crucial role, using her powers to enable the other phenomenons to see what they were doing, and Luminosity was able to find people trapped in places where they might never have been found, thanks to her ability to see out of the normal range of vision. Afterward, Grey Guardsman approached her. "Your Luminosity," he said. "We've been hearing about what you've been doing up here in the Bronx." Lucia bridled at what she thought was a very accusatory tone in the hero's voice. "Somebody has to. We're always the last ones to get anything, including phenomenons." Grey Guardsman smiled. "Until now." "Well, yeah. Look, I'm sorry if you don't approve of what I'm doing, but can I interest you in joining United Front?" Lucia's eyes went wide. "Excuse me?" Grey Guardsman repeated his question. "I thought you were coming over here to chew me out." "Hardly. You did good work here today, Luminosity. We'd be honored to have you join us." The small warehouse was tucked into the MTA rail yards at Waters Place. From the outside, it looked like a place where the Mass Transit Authority stored things they needed for the rail yard. But, as Dee's fancy-ass search engine had turned up, it was being leased from the city by a company called Excelsior Marketing. And it was located a 5-minute walk from HQ. Luminosity couldn't believe her luck, especially since she still needed to refill her MetroCard after the last trip on the 6. That same search had determined that the Bronx Bruisers roster currently was 7, including Fuerte and Fuego. Luminosity stood on the corner of Waters and Fink Avenue and concentrated, pulling some of the light that reflected off everything inside the warehouse and shifting it so that she could see it in front of her. The image she saw was dim and faded, but that was because she'd only taken some of the light. If she'd taken all of the light, it would appear to everyone inside as if it had gone completely dark. As it was, it would seem as if someone had dimmed the lights inside a little bit. She saw an immensely tall woman with brown hair tied into a bun, who sat on an easy chair fondling her phone. That was probably Mastiff. Unlike Fuerte, she really could be called Invulnerabilidad, as she had steel-hard skin. Next near her was a couch, on which sat 2 people playing Halo on an Xbox. A short, skinny Latinx kid, who couldn't have been more than 12 with dark hair and thick glasses, and a tall, thin African-American man with a huge afro and a thick beard. It looked like the kid was winning. Based on what Dee had found, those 2 were probably Shockwave and the Rain Man, respectively. Over at a large workbench, the marsupial was trying to fix the feet that Luminosity had burned through earlier, aided by a woman wearing a hijab. Dee's search engine hadn't turned up anything about the woman beyond the fact that her real name was Tazeen Califia, and that she didn't have a criminal record, which made her unique among the Bronx Bruisers. Finally, Fuego was sitting at a table eating an empanada. He had already been arraigned and made bail. Fuerte, though, hadn't actually been arrested yet, as she was still in the hospital having her broken leg treated. This hadn't surprised Lucia in the least. If Fuerte was arrested while needing medical attention, then the city would be on the hook for her medical bills. So the cops were holding off until she was discharged. Based on her experience as a former assistant district attorney, Lucia figured the 40th Precinct had a couple of uniforms parked outside Lincoln Medical Center, ready to slap the cuffs on Fuerte as soon as she limped out. All 6 of the non-injured members of the Bronx Bruisers were in one place. That was a bit of luck. The next thing Luminosity did was shift the light that was reflecting off her and send it into the warehouse between the couch where Shockwave and Rayman were playing Halo and the workbench where the marsupial and Califia were fixing the former's fake feet. To anyone on the sidewalk, it would look like Luminosity had disappeared, though she was still there, and was still keeping some of the light from inside in front of her so she could see what was happening. And to the bruisers within, it would look like she had materialized in their midst. Luminosity couldn't hear anything, but she saw Fuego get up from his chair upon her appearance inside. His lips formed the words, "It's that light bitch." She supposed expecting Fuego to pronounce Luminosity was asking too much. Shockwave dropped his Xbox controller and thrust his hands out toward Luminosity's image, which was exactly what she hoped he would do, and why she'd placed her image there specifically. The force that emanated from Shockwave's hands went right through the light image of Luminosity and instead hit the marsupial and Califia, shattering the workbench. Mastiff started shouting something while Shockwave looked all wide-eyed and confused. Concentrating and hoping it wouldn't compromise her ability to hold the image of the inside in front of her and the image of herself inside, she cohered the light around the Rain Man's Xbox console, superheating it to the point that it shorted out and burned his hands. He dropped it, wailing in pain. Fuego's hands started to glow just as the Rain Man angrily activated his own powers. A wave of water suddenly splashed right at Luminosity's image just as Fuego lunged for it. The water splashed harmlessly through her image, of course, but it tripped up Fuego, who was knocked to the floor by the barrage. Fuego, the Rain Man, and Mastiff were all yelling at each other now, while Shockwave just stood there looking scared. And then a very familiar-looking shield came flying out of nowhere and hit the Rain Man in the back. A figure emerged from the shadows, picking the shield up from the now very wet floor near the Rain Man's prone form. The Great Guardsman. He really was alive. At this point, Luminosity had to be in the thick of the action, especially if her erstwhile teammate was there. She removed her image from the inside and then moved toward the door. Throwing the side door open and running in, Luminosity heard Mastiff say, "Holy crap, you really are alive!" And she saw Grey Guardsman punch Shockwave in the jaw. That surprised her. GG was smarter than that. While a sock to the jaw looked good on television, it wasn't a practical way to hit someone. The jaw was very hard and hurt your hand. Now, to be fair, the Guardsman had an armored glove, which mitigated the trauma, but it was also very hard to do significant damage to the person he hit. Unless they were so paralyzed by the pain of having their jaw broken that they couldn't get up, which, based on the sounds of agony suddenly coming from Shockwave as he curled up on the floor, was the case here. "Hey, Fuego," Luminosity said. "You ready to give up yet? Or do you want me to take your powers away again?" "Screw you, puta." Fuego raised his arms. Once again, Luminosity made the glow in his hands go away, but it didn't stop him this time. As he reached for the chair he'd been sitting on, it began burning and he threw it at Luminosity. Or, rather, where she had been. leaving an unmoving static image of her reflected light in place. She made her actual body invisible and moved away. The chair passed harmlessly through the image, and Luminosity then ran up to Fuego, who couldn't see her, and delivered the same joint kick he'd given to his girlfriend in the mini-mart. He screamed in pain as he went down. Looking over, he saw the Grey Guardsman had Mastiff in a chokehold. After a few moments, she collapsed. "Impressive," Luminosity said. "I didn't think that move would work on someone with steel-hard skin like hers." "It's actually more effective," Grey Guardsman said. As usual, his voice was disguised. "Her hard skin presses even more against her windpipe. But then I wouldn't expect you to know that after that amateur display." That took Luminosity aback. "Excuse me?" "Playing games with light shows like that. You took way too many unnecessary risks." Luminosity couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was the chewing out she'd expected from Grey Guardsman when they'd first met over on Southern Boulevard after the train derailing, not now after they'd worked together for years. Putting her hands on her hips, she asked, "Mind telling me what you're doing here, watching me take unnecessary risks? For that matter, mind telling me where you've been?" "I do mind, actually. Just be aware that I'm back, and I'm watching you. Don't try to follow me." Guardsman retrieved his shield, and then left. While taking out her cell phone and calling 911, Luminosity tracked the light that was reflecting off her former teammate to see where he was going. He went out through the rail yards to Westchester Avenue, then leapt up onto the 6 train tracks over that street. After running down the tracks to Tremont Avenue, he doubled back onto Blondell Avenue and then behind a bike shop and got into a car. Within moments, he got onto the Hutchinson River Parkway and was out of Luminosity's range. It's as if he was trying to shake a tail, in this case, her. She heard the approaching sound of sirens and shook her head. She really didn't care about whatever stick her former mentor had up his ass. She'd put him and the United Front behind her after his apparently totally fake death. If he wanted to act weird, that was his problem. She went out to greet the cops from the 49th Precinct. "So, Mr. Brinsfield, tell us about your new real estate project." "I'd be happy to, Clara. Transform NYC is an initiative that I'm spearheading to change the face of the city. We've got a lot of history here in the Big Apple, but the thing about history is that it's very, very old. I believe that there are parts of this great municipality that are breaking down and crumbling. Buildings that were state-of-the-art during the Great Depression really shouldn't be asked to house people and businesses in the 2010s. We'll be targeting regions in all 5 boroughs that could use a good facelift." "Sounds like a very ambitious project." "Not at all, Clara. I like to think of myself as a 21st century Robert Moses. That famous city planner revolutionized the city, made us into the sprawling metropolis we are today. Moses knew in the mid-20th century that the future was roads, and the expressways that serve as the arteries provide New York's lifeblood are thanks to his tireless efforts. But now the future is real estate, and it's time to give those arteries a stronger nervous system." A couple of hours later, Luminosity was back on Commerce Avenue, having taken the BX-31 down from the 4-9. Deandra was sitting at her workstation when Luminosity came in. "They give up their boss?" Lucia shook her head. "They all lawyered up. The ones that were conscious, anyhow. Fuego and Shockwave are at Montefiore getting treated." "Figures. Well, I got me some good news. Excelsior Marketing, the people who leased that warehouse from the MTA, it's a shell company, and it's owned by Brinsfield Real Estate." Lucia's face fell. "Say what?" "Brinsfield Real Estate. You know, that crazy white boy who wanted to started that whole Transform NYC nonsense a couple of years back. Yeah, I know who he is, D." She ran a hand through her hair. She could feel her heart beating faster. No wonder Gigi was there. "Will you please start talking sense, Luch?" Lucia walked over to the fridge. Rather than take out a bottle of water, she grabbed a beer bottle instead. "Remember when I quit the DA's office? Yeah, he said he got tired of not prosecuting people who needed it." She used a bottle opener to pop the top of the beer, then tossed the cap into the trash can. "The guy who didn't get prosecuted that broke the camel's back for me was Tom Brinsfield. Grey Guardsman got him on some racketeering, brought him in and everything, and Scott wouldn't take the case." She took a long sip of beer. "You sure Excelsior is his?" "Completely sure. You got an address for Brinsfield?" Deandra regarded Lucia with an even more dubious expression than her childhood friend usually used on her. "What you gonna do, Luch? Beat up a rich white guy? Drag his ass to the cops?" "Maybe." And at an even more dubious look from D, Lucia sighed and continued, "Or maybe I'll just talk to him." "Uh-huh." Luminosity wasn't all that shocked to see Better Angel show up at the HQ on Commerce Avenue. She had been studiously ignoring the texts from her and from Scopes and Yoga since she'd quit United Front. She hadn't heard from Revec, but that wasn't entirely a surprise. Come on, Lumi, you can't just leave. We need you. You really don't, Angel. And United Front was doing just fine before I joined, and you'll be fine without me. Better Angel folded her arms over her chest. But you're such a great role model. I mean, you're the big folk hero of the Bronx. The people in the outer boroughs just adore you. You're more popular in Brooklyn than the Trolley Dodger, and he's from there. We've already lost guardsmen. We need someone who'll be a good example for everyone else. The example I want to set is that I'm someone who fights for the people of my home, and this is my home. I was honored when Grey Guardsman asked me, but it was never a good fit. And with him gone, it just seems right to move on. But Lumi, if there's an emergency, call me. But otherwise, I'm out. I'm sorry. She even almost meant the apology. Tom Brinsfield owned a penthouse apartment on Sutton Place on the east side of Manhattan. Luminosity took the 6 train down to 59th Street and then walked to the high-rise apartment building on Sutton and East 55th Street. Summoning the light reflecting from inside, she saw that nobody was home. So she waited outside the building, keeping herself invisible until Brinsfield arrived. A cold breeze blew in off the East River, and Luminosity wished she'd worn the winter Luminosity suit. But it had been 70 degrees this afternoon. New York in the fall was always a crapshoot weather-wise. Just as she was about to give up and go back to the nice, warm subway, a sleek black Lincoln Continental with taxi and limousine commission plates pulled up to the front of the building. The apartment building's doorman opened the back door, and Brinsfield climbed out, talking on his smartphone. No, Brinsfield was saying, I don't want to do it quietly. I want to divest ourselves of Excelsior as quickly, publicly, and loudly as possible. Have Therese do a press conference tomorrow. The doorman dashed ahead and opened the glass front door to Brinsfield. Luminosity slipped in behind him. Without even acknowledging the doorman, Brinsfield continued to the elevator bank at the rear of the spacious lobby. Tell them we're cooperating with NYPD and are appalled that one of our companies was engaged in illegal activity. Say we purchased them as part of a larger acquisition and figured they were harmless. What? The elevator made a small dinging noise as its doors opened. Luminosity invisibly entered right behind Brinsfield, who pulled a key fob out of his pocket. After waving it in front of a sensor, he pushed the button labeled Penthouse. Tell them we thought it was for storage. Look, you know the drill, Martin. Just handle it, okay? I just got home and there's a bottle of scotch with my name on it. Good night. He pulled the smartphone from his ear, pressed end, and then put it in his suit jacket pocket. The elevator arrived at the top floor and opened to a spacious living room with a picture window providing a lovely view of Roosevelt Island and the 59th Street Bridge. The furniture was all decorated in early high boring, looking like it was straight out of the rich white guy decorating catalog. Everything matched, and nothing looked like it was even used. Luminosity figured its owner really only used this apartment for status and to sleep in. Brinsfield turned the light on, then went straight for the wet bar at the far end of the living room. As he poured himself an amber liquid from a crystal decanter into a thick-bottomed glass, Luminosity said, So you're burying the evidence? Gasping and shaking with shock, Brinsfield dropped both the glass and the decanter. Neither broke, but the booze spilled all over the hardwood floor. Only then did Luminosity make herself visible. Ah, said Brinsfield. You're one of those phonemes, or whatever you call yourselves. You realize that's the contents of a $200 bottle of single malt scotch all over my floor because of you. I'm more of a beer and mojito gal myself. And it's phenomenons. I'm your Luminosity. I understand I have you to thank, actually. I had no idea that Excelsior Marketing was employing superpowered thugs to rob businesses in the South Bronx. Nice try. But first of all, I heard you talking to Martin on the phone about how you needed plausible deniability with Excelsior. And second of all, they didn't rob the businesses. In fact, they left all the cash alone and damaged all the valuable stuff instead of taking it. No, they were trying to intimidate these small businesses so they'd up and leave. A lot easier to transform NYC if those pesky local businesses leave. Then you can buy up the real estate for cheap and build whatever crap you want. That's a lovely story. But you're not a cop or a prosecutor, and you can't prove any of it. Mostly because it's not true. Really? You're going to lie to me? Brinsfield shrugged. Fine, I won't lie. Here's some truth. There is absolutely no trail that leads from the Bronx Bruisers to me or to my company. Everything you heard me tell Martin say is completely provable and believable and will have a metric crap ton of paperwork to verify it. All you have is your supposition. Learned your lesson, did you? Frowning, Brinsfield asked, Excuse me? When you were arrested a few years back, there was actual evidence against you, but the DA wouldn't prosecute. You got lucky. I wouldn't call it entirely luck, Brinchfield said. Brinchfield laughed. I'm sorry. Brinchfield grinned. But I would not call it that either. And regardless, it wasn't worth risking it happening again, so yes, I learned from my mistake. Have you? What mistake do you think I made? Coming here. Oh, that wasn't a mistake. Really? Brinchfield laughed now, a bitter, nasty sound. What do you hope to accomplish by breaking into my home? Well, I didn't break in, and you can't prove that I did any more than I can prove you're behind the bruisers. Maybe not, but you are trespassing. Look, I've had a really bad day. I'm a trustee of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and you may have heard that we had a big robbery. Someone stole one of our pieces of Asian art. I've been in meetings all about that all day, and then I find out about what happened at the rail yard, so please, leave. Fine. I'll go once I do what I came here to do. Brinchfield actually rolled his eyes at that. And what's that? To warn you, Tommy boy, stay away from St. Anne's Avenue. In fact, stay away from the entire Bronx. Robert Moses screwed our borough enough, cutting through neighborhoods with the Cross Bronx and the Deegan and the Bruckner. We don't need another screwing. We definitely don't need you. And then Luminosity snapped her fingers, and the entire apartment went dark. What the hell? Ow! Brinchfield apparently hit something very hard by suddenly finding himself in the dark. Luminosity felt her way back to the elevator and rang for it in the dark. Turn the damn lights back! Ow! Brinchfield bumped into something. Yeah! From the sounds of it, he then slipped in the spilled scotch and fell on the floor. Luminosity kept the room completely dark until she left the building, walking invisibly past the doorman, who was confused as to why the elevator doors opened with nobody inside. Back out in the cold Manhattan air, she shivered as she walked westward toward Lexington Avenue and the 6 train home. Lucia's grandparents had opened Maldonado Karate in 1972 at the height of the Bruce Lee-inspired martial arts craze. It started out in a storefront on 149th Street, but it did well enough that Los Abuelos were able to buy a property on 3rd Avenue and 156th and turn it into a karate dojo. While her parents were never interested in martial arts, that was Poppy's teenage rebellion to not do karate, both Lucia and her sister Gabriela started training when they turned 6. After Abuela died of cancer, Abuela moved to Florida and signed the dojo over to his granddaughters. Besides helping Gabriela with teaching when her work as Luminosity allowed, Lucia also sometimes came to the dojo when she was frustrated, to work off some steam by putting on a pair of gloves and punching a bag. Deandra found her there after her trip to see Brinchfield. Lucia continued to hit the bag, moving around it, punching left, left, right, over and over again. What's up, Dee? She asked as she jabbed twice and then hit hard with the right cross. Gabriella called, said you were pissed. Figured I'd come down and find out why. Brinchfield's the guy, all right, but we can't touch him. Excelsior Marketing may be a shell, but it's a damn good one. Jab, jab, cross. Son of a bitch covered his tracks. I go after him as Luminosity, then I'm tormenting an innocent real estate developer who just got screwed by a company he owns. Jab, jab, cross. Well, owned since he's selling it. Probably for pennies on the dollar, too. Not the only good thing that came out of this. He's out a bunch of money for that. Plus what he's got to pay for the bruiser's lawyers. That ain't all, Luch. Look, you got to the mini-mart and Changhua before it got too bad, and you got all of them before they hit anywhere else. You ain't gonna be able to scare off the businesses no more. Jab, jab, cross, then a big front snap kick to the bag. Then she sighed as the bag swung back and forth on its chain from the kick and turned to face Dee, finally. I guess. Don't guess, Luch. You're a damn hero, so start acting like it. You said you wanted to help the people. Well, there's a whole lot of people in this here neighborhood who get to keep their neighborhood the way it is because of you. Now, come on, let's get something to eat. You've been beating that bag for an hour. You gotta be hungry. How did you know I was here for an hour? Gabriella called me an hour ago. Took that long for the BX-21 to get me here. I mean, I could have got an Uber, but I figured you'd want to blow off some steam first. Lucia laughed and wrapped her arm around her best friend. Thanks, Dee. Deandra pushed the arm off and recoiled. Yo, get away from me! You all covered in sweat and you stink! You got a shower in this place, right? Yeah. Lucia pulled her gloves off. Good! Use it! Then we're going to Changhua for dinner. Oh yeah? Damn right! Best spare ribs in the Bronx. To show the whole shared universe thing, the search engine, actually, I didn't create that. Michael Burstein did for his story, Red Sky in Morning. What's the title? I lose track of what. Yeah, Red Sky and Morning, which is after the story right after mine, and Deandra and Luminosity appear in that as well, and Red Sky makes use of the search engine in question. Um, and Brinsfield is also the bad guy in Mary Fann's story, featuring sarcastic Fringehead, which is my favorite superhero name ever now. And it was called Salt for Gold, was her story. And the robbery at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that Brinsfield referred to at the end there is what happens in Mary's story. So lots of cool stuff. And Luminosity appears briefly in Mike Friedman's framing story as well. Anyhow, both Phenomenon's Every Human Creature, which I just read from, and Phenomenon Season of Darkness, the second anthology in the series, which has another Luminosity story by me called This Little Light of Mine, are on sale from Crazy 8 Press. You can find it at whatever your book dealer of choice is, or directly from crazy8press.com. Thank you very much for watching. Please, you can find me online. My website is DeCandido.net. My blog is at DeCandido.wordpress.com. I am on the Facebook and the Twitter and the Instagram, and here on the YouTube, obviously. And you can also find my writing at Tor.com. And please, if you could support me at Patreon.com/KRAD, that would be awesome. There's lots of cool stuff on there for anywhere between $1 and $20 a month, depending on what you want to get. And that's it. Hope you have a wonderful month, and I will see you back in March. At the middle of March, when I will be here to read a story called What You Can Become Tomorrow, which was in an anthology called 3 Time Travelers Walk In 2. Until then, please stay safe, and I'll see you in a month.